The Vatican, the smallest independent state in the world by both area and population, has long wielded influence vastly disproportionate to its size. Nestled within Rome, the heart of the Catholic Church has acted as a spiritual leader for over 1 billion followers, while also functioning as a deeply political entity. Often cloaked in secrecy and guarded tradition, the Vatican's reach has extended far beyond the pulpit, affecting political shifts, global alliances, revolutions, and conflicts. Over centuries, the papacy and its intricate network of clergy, diplomats, and institutions have influenced major events behind closed doors. Although much of its role in shaping history is publicly visible through encyclicals, concordats, and statements of peace, the Vatican's more shadowed activities, covert diplomacy, intelligence exchange, moral legitimization of regimes, and backdoor channels, reveal a more complex and sometimes controversial involvement in world affairs. One of the most significant periods highlighting the Vatican's shadow diplomacy was during World War II. Pope Pius XII has been at the center of debate for decades, with critics accusing him of silence in the face of Nazi atrocities, while defenders argue that he was conducting secret operations to aid Jews and oppose Hitler covertly. Historical documents and testimonies reveal a nuanced picture. The Vatican did shelter some Jews and conveyed intelligence to the Allies, but it also sought to maintain neutrality, fearing that direct condemnation of Hitler would provoke greater violence. The Vatican's concordat with Nazi Germany in 1933, meant to protect the rights of the Church in the Third Reich, was seen by many as an appeasement and legitimization of a regime that would become genocidal. The Vatican was caught in a balancing act, preserving its institutions while cautiously attempting to mitigate evil from within. Yet this very posture has led many to question whether the Vatican's secretive nature hindered more direct action that could have saved lives. The post-war period did not end the Vatican's clandestine involvement in political maneuvering. As Europe was being reshaped by Cold War dynamics, the Vatican emerged as a quiet but formidable player in the ideological war against communism. Catholicism and Marxist atheism were fundamentally incompatible, and the Vatican leveraged its moral authority and underground connections to challenge Soviet influence in Eastern Europe. Perhaps the most profound example of this involvement was the Vatican's support of the Solidarity movement in Poland in the 1980s. Pope John Paul II, himself Polish, used his position to inspire a wave of resistance against the communist regime. His visits to Poland galvanized the opposition and inspired national unity. Behind the scenes, the Vatican worked with Western intelligence agencies, including the CIA, to fund solidarity and protect its leaders. Documents and declassified files reveal a triangular relationship between the Vatican, Washington, and dissident movements in the Eastern Bloc, forming a soft power alliance that significantly contributed to the downfall of communism in Europe. Beyond Europe, the Vatican has played secret roles in Latin American politics, some of them deeply controversial. During the Cold War, many Latin American countries became battlegrounds between leftist revolutionaries and right-wing authoritarian regimes, often with U.S. involvement. The Vatican's position varied based on local clergy, papal directives, and geopolitical calculus. In some cases, liberation theology, a Catholic movement emphasizing social justice and aligning with Marxist ideals, was supported by priests who sided with the oppressed. However, the Vatican hierarchy, particularly under Pope John Paul II and Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, viewed liberation theology with suspicion, fearing it was too aligned with communism. The Vatican often sided with conservative forces, sometimes turning a blind eye to abuses committed by regimes in Argentina, Chile, and El Salvador. The extent of the Vatican's quiet backing of these regimes remains a subject of academic and moral scrutiny, with evidence pointing to a complicated relationship where the Church sought to preserve its institutions, influence, and religious freedom amid volatile revolutions. Africa, too, saw the Vatican's covert hand. especially in the post-colonial era when nations were reshaping themselves and the Church sought to maintain a foothold. The Vatican's diplomatic missions in African countries were often among the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering operations, reporting not just on religious matters, but on political shifts, tribal conflicts, and ideological movements. Vatican embassies, called nunciatures, provided detailed briefings to Rome on conditions that could affect Catholic communities. In Rwanda, the role of the Catholic Church during the 1994 genocide remains one of the most tragic and controversial examples of its entanglement in politics. While some priests and nuns protected Tutsis, others participated in or facilitated massacres. The Vatican's delayed and vague response, along with its protection of clergy accused of crimes, raised questions about whether institutional preservation and fear of scandal had once again trumped moral clarity. Though the Vatican has since expressed sorrow, critics argue that a more proactive stance could have saved thousands. The Vatican has also engaged in back-channel diplomacy that quietly shaped global negotiations. One of the lesser-known but critically important interventions was the Vatican's role in helping to establish diplomatic relations between the United States and Cuba in 2014. Pope Francis, who had long-standing experience in Latin American politics, personally facilitated secret talks between Washington and Havana. This delicate negotiation, carried out in near-total secrecy over many months, eventually led to the easing of decades-old hostilities. Letters from the Pope to both President Obama and President Castro urged reconciliation and played a decisive moral role. The Vatican hosted some of the early meetings that laid the groundwork for détente. This example highlighted how the Vatican, even in the 21st century, remains a vital diplomatic intermediary, trusted by opposing nations due to its unique status as a spiritual power without territorial ambitions. One of the Vatican's most enduring secret influences lies in the realm of international finance. The Vatican Bank, officially known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, IOR, has been involved in numerous scandals involving money laundering, illicit transfers, and opaque financial dealings. During the Cold War, there were allegations that the IOR helped funnel money to anti-communist movements across Europe and Latin America. One of the darkest financial mysteries remains the case of Roberto Calvi, a banker connected to the Vatican Bank who was found hanging under London's Blackfriars Bridge in 1982. Dubbed God's banker, Calvi was allegedly involved in laundering mafia money and mismanaging Vatican funds. His death, officially ruled a murder, sparked investigations that revealed deep connections between the Vatican, Italian Freemasonry, notably the clandestine P2 Lodge, and organized crime. Though reforms have been introduced in recent years to increase transparency, the shadow of financial secrecy still looms over the Vatican's economic operations, and questions remain about whether such networks were used to exert influence on global events. The Vatican has also held considerable sway in shaping the global moral and ethical agenda, often lobbying behind closed doors at international institutions like the United Nations. While it is not a full member state, the Vatican has permanent observer status and uses its influence to affect discussions on reproductive rights, family structures, euthanasia, and biotechnology. Its stances, often rooted in strict interpretations of Catholic doctrine, have influenced public policy in numerous countries, especially in Africa, South America, and parts of Europe. Critics argue that this influence sometimes undermines women's rights and scientific progress, particularly in the areas of contraception and abortion. However, supporters maintain that the Vatican provides a necessary counterbalance to secularism and upholds moral values in a rapidly shifting global culture. These debates are often framed publicly as ethical or religious matters, but internal documents and diplomatic cables have shown how the Vatican quietly lobbies leaders, coordinates with like-minded NGOs, and uses its extensive network to build coalitions around its vision of moral order. In recent years, the Vatican has entered the realm of global climate diplomacy. Pope Francis's 2015 encyclical Laudato Si', which addressed environmental stewardship and the dangers of climate change, was widely praised for elevating ecological issues to a moral imperative. Behind the scenes, the Vatican lobbied heads of state to adopt sustainable policies and emphasize the responsibility of the global North toward developing nations suffering from ecological degradation. The Vatican's involvement in the Paris Climate Agreement process, though indirect, was significant. It offered a moral voice that bolstered the efforts of secular environmental advocates and gave legitimacy to climate action among religious communities. This use of soft power, framing environmental protection as a divine responsibility, showcases the Vatican's evolving strategy in influencing world affairs not just through doctrine, but through globally resonant causes. Perhaps most enigmatic is the Vatican's extensive intelligence apparatus, often compared, though less discussed, to that of a state intelligence agency. The Vatican's diplomatic corps is highly trained and embedded in nearly every country, reporting on local developments with remarkable precision. These nuncios often serve longer terms than typical diplomats, develop deep local contacts, and send detailed dispatches back to Rome. Some historians argue that during major 20th century conflicts, Vatican intelligence was more accurate than even that of the CIA or KGB, particularly due to its grassroots networks and access to information through the confessional. The Church's unique position, respected by both oppressed populations and oppressive regimes, gave it access others lacked. While it rarely publicizes its intelligence activities, the Vatican's internal archives, known as the Apostolic Archive, contain troves of political correspondence, secret memos, and sensitive evaluations that world leaders would envy. In conclusion, the Vatican's secret involvement in world events reflects a paradoxical blend of spiritual leadership and realpolitik. While professing neutrality, the Holy See has often taken sides, subtly or explicitly, based on theology, institutional survival, or a perceived moral duty. From covert Cold War interventions and clandestine diplomacy to intelligence gathering and financial intrigue, the Vatican has never been a passive observer. Its unique position as both a religious and political entity allows it to operate in spaces other powers cannot. Whether as a peace broker or an institution complicit in moral compromise, the Vatican's shadowy fingerprints on the pages of history challenge us to look beyond appearances. Understanding its secret influence is essential not only for historians, but for anyone seeking to comprehend how power, faith, and diplomacy intertwine in shaping the fate of nations.